Level 1, the cook. You're standing over a 50-gallon reactor in a cinder block building outside Culiacan, and the smell of acetic anhydride is so strong it's stripping the lining from your sinuses. You're manufacturing heroin, not cutting it, not packaging it, not moving it. Manufacturing. Converting raw opium paste into diacetylmorphine using a process you learned from a man named Coronel, who learned it from a chemist in Guadalajara, who learned it from a journal article published in 1974 that described the synthesis for academic purposes. The academic purposes ended somewhere between the journal and the cinder block building. You're 24 years old. You've been doing this for 3 years. Your hands have a chemical burn on the left palm that never fully healed because you don't wear gloves. Gloves reduce dexterity, and dexterity is the difference between a clean conversion and an explosion that turns you into a headline nobody reads. You process 40 kilos of raw opium per week. The conversion ratio is roughly 10 to 1. 40 kilos of paste becomes 4 kilos of heroin. Street value in the United States, approximately $1.2 million per kilo. You don't see that money? You see $3,000 a week, cash, delivered in an envelope by a man named Paz, who drives a white pickup and doesn't make eye contact. $3,000 is more than anyone in your village makes in a month. It's enough to send money to your mother in Badiraguado, enough to keep your younger brother in school, enough to feel like you're building something, even though what you're building is a supply chain that ends in a needle in someone's arm in Baltimore or Detroit or a town in Ohio you'll never visit. The DEA doesn't know your name. They know the product. They've tested samples seized at the border and identified a chemical signature specific to your process, a residual acetyl marker that functions like a fingerprint. They call it Signature 9 in internal reports. They don't know it belongs to a 24-year-old standing in a cinder block building with a burned hand and an 8th grade education. They just know Signature 9 is consistent, high purity, and responsible for an increasing percentage of the heroin entering the southwestern United States. You're a data point in a database. That's level 1. You exist as chemistry, not as a person. Level 2. The network. Coronel promotes you, not formally. There's no title, no ceremony. He just starts trusting you with more. You're moved from production to logistics, overseeing the transport of finished product from the lab to a warehouse in Mazatlan where it's packaged for shipment. You manage 6 drivers, 3 vehicles, and a schedule that changes weekly based on intelligence. Coronel receives from contacts inside the Mexican Federal Police. The corruption is structural, not transactional. The officers aren't bribed per shipment. They're on salary, $4,000 a month each, paid through a network of shell accounts that Coronel's accountant manages from a laptop in a rented apartment above a dentist's office. Your salary increases to $8,000 a week. You move to a house in Mazatlan with a gate and a courtyard and a view of the ocean from the 2nd floor. You buy your mother a refrigerator and your brother a laptop for school. You send photos of the house to nobody because photographs are evidence and evidence is how people go to prison. The DEA begins building a case file. Not on you specifically, on the network. They've intercepted communications between Coronel and a distributor in Nogales who moves product across the border through a tunnel system beneath the industrial park. The distributor is sloppy. He uses the same phone for 6 months. The DEA clones it, downloads 4 months of text messages, and begins mapping the organization's structure. Your name appears for the first time in a wiretap transcript. Not your full name. A nickname Coronel uses. Flaco. The DEA analyst who processes the transcript adds Flaco to the organizational chart. 1 level below Coronel, function unknown. You're a box on a whiteboard in an office in Phoenix. The box doesn't have a face yet. Level 3, the target. The Nogales distributor gets arrested at a checkpoint with 12 kilos in a false compartment. He cooperates within 72 hours. He gives the DEA everything. Names, routes, the tunnel system, Coronel's phone number, and a description of the man Coronel calls Flaco. Mid-20s. Thin. chemical burn on his left hand. Works logistics out of Mazatlan. The DEA office in Mexico City opens a file with your description. They coordinate with Mexican federal agents, the ones who aren't on Coronel's payroll, and begin surveillance on the Mazatlan warehouse. Satellite imagery, phone intercepts, a confidential informant who works at the port and reports on unusual vehicle activity. Your face appears on camera for the first time 3 weeks into the surveillance. Grainy. Long-range lens. You're standing outside the warehouse talking to one of your drivers. The analyst in Phoenix matches the image to the description. Thin. Left hand. Mid-20s. Flecko gets a real name. Yours. The organizational chart updates. Your box moves up. You're no longer function unknown. Your logistics coordinator, reporting to Coronel, responsible for transport operations between Culiacan and the border. The DEA assigns a case agent, a woman named Barfield who's been working cartel cases for 9 years and has the specific patience of someone who understands that drug investigations are built in months and demolished in minutes. She requests additional surveillance assets. She gets half of what she asks for because the budget was cut in the last fiscal year, and every office is competing for the same resources. Barfield starts building a prosecution. Not against Coronel, not yet. Against you. You're the accessible target. Coronel operates in Sinaloa with layers of protection, corrupt officials, armed security, a population that views him as an employer rather than a criminal. You operate in Mazatlan, which is more exposed, more surveilled, more penetrable. Barfield's strategy is standard. Take the mid-level operator. Flip him. Use his testimony to build the case against the principal. You're not the target. You're the tool. Level 4, the squeeze. The pressure arrives in ways you don't immediately recognize. A driver gets stopped at a military checkpoint outside Mazatlan. Routine, or it looks routine. His vehicle is searched. Nothing is found because the shipment isn't scheduled until Thursday, but the checkpoint wasn't random. It was intelligence-driven, designed to map your routes by observing which vehicles your drivers use and which roads they travel. The DEA is building a pattern analysis. Every checkpoint, every observation, every intercepted call adds a data point. The data points form a picture. The picture is your operation. Coronel notices. He doesn't panic. He's been in this business for 20 years and has survived 4 DEA investigations by being patient and adaptable. He tells you to change the routes, use different vehicles, stagger the schedule. You comply, but changing patterns has a cost. Drivers get confused. Shipments arrive late. A delivery to the tunnel in Nogales is delayed by 2 days, which delays the border crossing, which delays the distribution in Phoenix, which costs Coronel $400,000 in lost revenue. He doesn't blame you. He blames the pressure, but you see something in his face you haven't seen before. Calculation. The specific look of a man assessing whether you've become more expensive than you're worth. Your brother calls from Badiraguato. He's graduating from secondary school. He wants to study engineering in Guadalajara. The tuition is $6,000 a semester. You tell him you'll cover it. He doesn't ask where the money comes from. He's 17 and smart enough to have figured it out, and young enough to not yet understand what the knowledge costs. You wire the tuition through a money transfer service using a fake ID. The transaction is flagged by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in Washington, D.C. The flag is forwarded to the DEA. Barfield adds it to your file. The tool is developing a financial footprint. Level 5, the raid. The arrest warrant is signed by a federal judge in the District of Arizona on a Tuesday morning. It's sealed, which means you don't know it exists. The DEA coordinates with Mexican authorities through a bilateral agreement that's been renegotiated 4 times since 2010 and currently allows joint operations under specific conditions that nobody fully agrees on. The operation is planned for a Thursday, 5:30 a.m., your house in Mazatlan. You're sleeping when the door comes in. Mexican Marines, not police. Marines because the police can't be trusted, and the Marines answer to the Navy, which has a different corruption profile. The breach is fast. Flashbangs. Shouted commands in Spanish. You're on the floor with a knee on your spine before you're fully awake. The chemical burn on your left hand presses into the tile of your bedroom floor. You're handcuffed with zip ties. You're dragged outside in your underwear. The courtyard you paid for with heroin money is filled with men in tactical gear who don't look at your face because you're not a person to them. You're a box on a whiteboard that just got checked. They search the house for 4 hours. They find $92,000 in cash behind a false wall in the closet. They find 3 phones, 2 of which are encrypted with software that the DEA's technical division will crack in 11 days. They find a ledger you kept in a kitchen drawer because you're not coronel and you don't have an accountant and you needed to track shipments somehow. The ledger contains dates, weights, and route designations written in a shorthand that you thought was coded, but that Barfield's analyst deciphers in an afternoon. You're transported to Mexico City, then to Tucson under a provisional extradition order that Barfield has been preparing for 4 months. You're in a federal detention facility by Friday evening. The cell is 8 by 10 feet. The mattress is 2 inches thick. The light stays on 18 hours a day. You're 27 years old and you're facing conspiracy to distribute heroin, international drug trafficking, and money laundering. The mandatory minimum is 10 years. The guidelines suggest 25 to life based on the quantity attributed to your operation. Level 6, the deal. Barfield visits you on a Monday. She's not what you expected. She's 43, short hair, no jewelry, the kind of person who looks like she teaches high school science until she starts talking about wiretap evidence, and then you understand that her patience isn't kindness, it's method. She lays it out. They have the wiretaps. They have the ledger. They have the Nogales distributor's testimony. They have the financial records. They have Signature 9 linked to seizures totaling 340 kilos over 3 years. She tells you the case is built. Going to trial means life. Cooperating means something less than life. She asks if you want to talk about coronel. You don't answer, not because of loyalty. Coronel would replace you in a week and wouldn't lose sleep over it. You don't answer because of your brother. Coronel knows where your family lives. Cooperation means testimony. Testimony means your name in a court record. Your name in a court record means Coronel's people visit Badiraguato. Your brother's 18 now. First semester of engineering. He has a future that doesn't involve cinder block buildings and chemical burns. You're not going to be the reason that future ends. Barfield comes back 3 more times. Each visit, the offer adjusts. Witness protection for your family. Relocation. New identities. She explains the program with the specificity of someone who's made this pitch before and knows which details matter. She tells you about families who've been successfully relocated. She tells you the statistics on witness safety. She tells you Coronel will eventually be caught regardless, and your cooperation accelerates a timeline that's already in motion. On the 4th visit, she says something that sits in your chest for 3 days. She says, your brother's tuition payment was traced. She says the DEA has the transfer records. She says if the case goes to trial, those records become public evidence. She says Coronel's people monitor court proceedings. She says if you don't cooperate, the thing you're trying to protect your brother from happens anyway, just slower. You sit in your cell and do the math. Cooperate, and your family enters witness protection, and your brother finishes school under a different name in a different city. And you serve 12 years instead of life. Refuse and you serve life, and the tuition records surface, and Coronel's people do what Coronel's people do, and your brother's engineering degree becomes a memorial instead of a career. You tell Barfield you'll talk. She nods. She doesn't smile. She opens a notebook and writes the date at the top of a blank page and waits. The debriefing takes 6 weeks. You give them everything. The lab in Culiacan, the warehouse in Mazatlan, the routes, the drivers, the tunnel, the payroll for the corrupt officers, Coronel's phone numbers, his safe houses, his accountant above the dentist's office. You draw maps from memory. You identify photographs. You explain the chemistry of Signature 9 in a conference room in Tucson, while 3 DEA agents and a federal prosecutor take notes, and a court reporter types every word. Your mother and brother are relocated 8 days after your first debriefing session. New city, new names. Your brother transfers to a university you're not told the name of, studying engineering under an identity that has no connection to the village in Badiraguado, or the brother in federal custody, who paid his tuition with heroin money. You don't know where they are. That's the point. The distance is the protection. Coronel is arrested 7 months later in a joint DEA Marine operation at a ranch outside Culiacan. He doesn't resist. He walks out of the house in a pressed shirt and cowboy boots and gets into the back of an armored vehicle with the composure of a man who always knew this day was coming and budgeted for it emotionally. He's extradited to the United States 14 months after that. Your testimony is central to the prosecution. You testify for 4 days in a courtroom in Tucson behind a screen that hides your face from the gallery, but not from Coronel, who sits at the defense table 30 feet away and watches you with an expression you can't read. Not anger, not betrayal, assessment. The same calculation you saw in Mazatlan when the shipments started arriving late. He's measuring what you cost him. Coronel gets life without parole. You get 12 years. The judge notes your cooperation. He notes the scope of the conspiracy. He notes that 340 kilos of heroin attributed to your operation represents approximately 17 million individual doses. He says that number out loud in the courtroom, and the weight of it fills the room like something physical. You're transferred to a federal facility in Louisiana, medium security. Your cell is 9 by 10 feet, a window that faces a parking lot. You work in the kitchen. You eat food you helped prepare. You read books your public defender sends because she's the only person who has your current address. Your mother writes through the marshal's service. The letters arrive with the return address redacted. Her handwriting is the same. The words are careful, General, designed to pass through the hands of people who read inmate mail without revealing anything about where she is or who she's become. Your brother graduated. You know this because your mother wrote a single line in her last letter. He did it. 2 words that contain an engineering degree and a new name, and a future that exists because you cooked heroin in a cinder block building and then told the government everything about the man who taught you how. You're 32 now. You'll be 39 when you get out. Your left hand still has the chemical burn. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's just a scar, tissue that formed around damage and became part of the landscape. Some mornings you look at it and think about the reactor in Culiacan, the acetic anhydride, the 40 kilos of paste that became 4 kilos of powder that became $1.2 million per kilo, that became $3,000 in an envelope that became your brother's tuition, that became a wire transfer that became a flag in a database, that became a warrant that became a knee on your spine at 5:30 in the morning. The chain is that long. The links are that specific. And every one of them started with a burned hand in a cinder block building where a 24-year-old who couldn't afford gloves decided that dexterity mattered more than safety. He was right about the dexterity. He was wrong about everything else.